understanding each other more deeply deepens our mutual respect. But we couldn't have got here this evening without the tenacity and hard work of Oren and the gentle and support of Rabbi Larry. And I know, Larry, that Redbridge Faith Forum is very dear to your heart and an important part of your work as our rabbi. One of the great people who have taught us so much about interfaith work, of course, was Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. May the memory of that great man be a blessing. Rabbi Sachs wrote, "The glory of the created world is its astonishing multiplicity, the thousands of different languages spoken by humankind, the hundreds of faiths, the proliferations of cultures, the sheer variety of the imaginative expressions of the human spirit, in most of which, if we listen closely, we will hear the voice of God telling us something we need to know." And that is what Rabbi Sachs meant by the dignity of difference. Phil, I'm very shortly going to ask you to talk to us about a Christian view of marriage. And may I, without embarrassing you, Phil, just say a few words about you.
Please do, yes.
Go on, embarrass him.
I'll do my best. Phil has been a Christian representative on the Board of Trustees of Redbridge Faith Forum since 2011. He serves as a steward of the gospel and is on the parish council at St. Sed's Roman Catholic Church in Goodmays. And impressively, Phil holds an MA in pastoral theology and has worked for the Diocese of Brentwood for 8 years as Director of the Commissions of Social Justice and Coordinator for Marriage and Family Life. And Phil, that introduces you very nicely to your subject, but just a few housekeeping notes. We are recording this session, and I hope that's okay with everybody. Phil will be delighted to take questions after his talk, and please to put your questions initially on the chat on Zoom, and Oren will pick them up and present them to Phil later. Phil, the Zoom floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Tony. Thank you. Can I just ask that everybody remains muted for the moment? I was getting a bit of interference, and it might have been somebody just connecting their mic or something, but just as an extra housekeeping. Anyway, it's a great pleasure and a great privilege to be able to speak to you about a subject that I find and feel is incredibly important, certainly in today's society, where I'm not sure about other traditions, but we're seeing the number of marriages diminishing dramatically. And I'm not talking about the effect of COVID, I'm talking about the effect of society. And it's a sad fact that we see a greater degree of secularization of society, and marriage as being something that's, you know, a nice to do thing rather than what I see as a real fundamental core of human society. Just by way of a bit of interest, where I can share it, that was me and my wife almost 50 years ago. This year we celebrate 50 years of marriage. So if I can explain, the wedding was an event. It was an event. And as we begin to unpick what happens within a Christian context, it was a huge event. It was the joining not only of two people, but it was the joining of two families. But the marriage, as we now know after 50 years, is an achievement. And it's something that requires work and understanding and a whole raft of other aspects to make that marriage last and develop. It's a very sad fact that statistically, I think it's, well, the last time I looked, it was around about 50% of marriages, you know, will end in a divorce. You know, generally, before the 5th birthday of the first child. So we can see that it's how important marriage is, but also that it's very important to actually have mechanisms and understanding to make the marriage last. Anyway, let's just move on, and we'll have a little bit of history. And if we think about marriage, we look back to the Bible, and the Bible is seen, and I'm talking with references to what we refer to as the Old and the New Testament. And I do apologize if I use terms that you may not be familiar with, but as I say, I'm speaking about this from a Christian perspective, and particularly from a Catholic perspective as well. But in the Bible, the covenant between God and his people best expresses married love. The Catechism, that's our sort of a source of information within the Catholic Church, points out that the mutual love of a man and a woman is an image of the absolute and unfailing love of God's love for us. The promise of fidelity to each other made by man and woman in the sacrament of marriage is an unbreakable union of their two lives. Christian marriage is a reflection of the new covenant between Christ and the Church, and as a sacrament echoes the faithful love of God. Like every sacrament, marriage reveals something of the mystery of God. In the Old Testament, the prophets described God's covenant with Israel as a marriage. The prophet Hosea refers to God's faithfulness to Israel despite their unfaithfulness. The other prophets, like Jeremiah and Ezekiel, continue to compare the relationship of God to his people in terms of marriage. Seeing God's covenant with Israel in the image of exclusive and faithful married love, the prophets prepared the chosen people's conscience for a deepened understanding of the unity and indissolubility of marriage. The books of Ruth and Tobit bear moving witness to an elevated sense of marriage and to the fidelity and tenderness of spouses. Tradition has always seen in the Song of Solomon a unique expression of human love, a pure reflection of God's love, a love strong as death and that many waters cannot quench. In the New Testament, St. Paul sees marriage as reflecting the love of God for Israel and refers to marriage as linked to Christ's love for the Church. He recognizes this as a great mystery in the Lord. The nuptial covenant between God and his people Israel has prepared the way for the new and everlasting covenant in which the Son of God, by becoming incarnate and giving his life, has united to himself in a certain way all mankind, saved by him, thus preparing for the wedding feast of the Lamb. The early Christians did not celebrate in church, nor was it understood as a liturgical action. Marriage was celebrated according to the social custom of the time. Christians did, however, recognize marriage as sacramental and sacred because it reflected the love Christ had for the Church. Rooted in the conviction of Christ's faithfulness, marriage was seen to be an unbreakable commitment, a covenant of love. In the 4th century, a Christian union or marriage was celebrated with a prayer and a blessing following the legal marriage. From the 9th to the 11th century, the legal aspect of marriage went from the state to the church, and during this time, marriage began to be celebrated more frequently as a liturgical church ritual. In the 13th century, when a better understanding of sacraments was developed, marriage was included as one of the 7 sacraments of the Church. However, it was not until the 16th century that the marriage was clearly defined as a sacrament, and the Council of Trent required that Catholics be married in the presence of a priest and 2 witnesses. A bit on the vocation of marriage, and vocation comes from the Latin meaning to call, so it was seen as a calling. The Church in the modern world has this to say about the vocation of marriage. Let married people themselves, who are created in the image of the living God and constituted in an authentic personal dignity, be united together in equal affection, agreement of mind, and mutual holiness. Thus, in the footsteps of Christ, the principle of life, they will bear witness by their faithful love in the joys and sacrifices of their calling, to that mystery of love which the Lord revealed to the world by his death and resurrection. All baptized Christians are called to be of service to others. Through the sacrament of marriage, Christian spouses are called to witness constantly to God's love by loving each other and by sharing their love with others. For husband and wife, marriage becomes the primary way they grow in their relationship with God. Christian marriage, lived in faithful love and commitment, builds up the life of the whole Christian community. The deep richness of the sacraments is expressed through ritual actions and symbols which reveal the mystery of God encountered in each of the sacraments. We use water, oil, light, bread and wine, symbolizing new life, healing and strength. In the sacrament of marriage, the exchange of vows is the primary symbol, symbolizing commitment. This commitment is also expressed and made tangible in the exchange of rings, a symbol of God's everlasting love and covenant relationship.
Phil, sorry to interrupt. Just so you know, your camera is off again.
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. Okay, well, just on that pause as well, while I get that fixed up again. Sorry about that. We will be breaking just before 8 o'clock because somebody has raised the issue that there is the clap for carers and people, NHS and frontline workers. So I will pause at just a minute before 8 o'clock. And Oren, if you could just give us an indication at a minute before, just to let those people who want to actually enter that. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Oren. Yeah, sorry about the camera. Where are we? That's it. So the liturgy of a Catholic marriage, and again, in many Christian traditions, this will follow very much a similar way, but there are some specific things within Catholicism that form part of that. So again, some of this for other Christians will be very familiar, and others might be just slightly different. Most couples come to the arrangements for their wedding day with all the practicalities of the day uppermost in their mind. Although the celebrations are an important part, it is vital to those helping them to prepare the liturgy for the marriage to encourage them to look for readings and music which will emphasize the sacramentality of marriage. In the celebration of a marriage, which is normally within the context of a mass, that's the main service within the Catholic Church. Certain elements should be stressed. The first is the liturgy of the word, which brings out the importance of Christian marriage in the history of salvation and the duties and responsibilities it involves for the sanctification of the couple and their children. It is also emphasised are the consent of the contracting parties, which the priest asks and receives. A special nuptial blessing on the bride, by which the priest implores God's blessing on the marriage covenant. And finally, the reception of communion by the groom and the bride and by others present, which above all is the source of love and lifts us up into communion with our Lord and with one another. Just a word on the readings, and the readings will generally be one from what we refer to as the Old Testament, from the Psalms, and also from the New Testament. So there'll be 3 separate readings generally. Marriage can take place either within or outside the Mass, and the choice of ceremony, either a Mass or a wedding service, will often be determined by the fact if the marriage is between a Catholic or somebody who isn't a Catholic or another non-baptized person. Marriages between a Catholic and a baptized person may take place during the Mass, but generally the service is slightly shortened. Many of those present at the wedding will be unused to liturgical celebrations and will only hear the gospel and receive communion on such occasions. The priest should be aware that those present show special consideration, and the fact that many may not even be used to being in a church or maybe from different traditions. It's an interesting fact that within our own church that we've had a number of marriages that have been people from one from a Catholic tradition and one from many other traditions, including a Hindu and a Sikh. So it's not unheard of, although it sometimes is slightly more unusual. Readings and music for liturgy needs a great deal of guidance, and because sometimes we find that people may not be used to choosing readings or choosing hymns. It was really interesting, just as an aside, one bride particularly wanted to have the Beatles song Yesterday played. And if anybody's familiar with the lyrics of that, the first line goes, yesterday all my troubles seemed so far away, now it looks as though they're here to stay. So not a particularly good choice of music for a wedding. The psalms are often sung during the marriage ceremony as well. And again, going back to that whole issue of secular music, again, people will often have some ideas that they want a particularly nice piece of music that they're used to, that they dance to or whatever. But generally we say, well, that's probably best for the reception, and let's stick to something that is actually more fitting within the context of the church. Of course, the marriages will always have a rehearsal, and that's a good time that we find that many of these little issues get sorted out. Right. The other thing about it is that within the Catholic Church, that the churches are licensed for the civil part of the marriage, but that generally is handled by either the registrar or an authorised person, which I think is very similar to other traditions, you know, in other circumstances. The only important thing is that they do hear both the declaration and the vows being said, and they have to be within the parameters of the legal format. And then, of course, then the marriage can be registered not only within the church context, which it is, but also within the civil context as well. There is a whole period of let me just flick through those. Legislation. The important thing about being married anywhere is that there are often certain legislative processes that need to be actually gone through. And generally, as I intimated earlier on, if at least one of the couple has to be a Catholic to be married within the Catholic Church. And generally speaking, I think that not necessarily as a Catholic, but as a baptized Christian to be married within any Christian context. But it is a legal requirement under canon law, and canon law is the law of the church, and civil law, that all legal requirements are fully complied in order for the marriage to be solemnized. And that's something which I think is fairly standard throughout. But if you don't follow those, and again, the way that we handle that within the church is that the couple would register with the local registry office and receive a certificate, I think it's called a certificate, which is the permission to get married. And it tells you the church and the couple, their ages, where they live, and all of that sort of thing. And that's the authority that the authorised person or registrar has got to actually then register the marriage that has occurred within that church. If you don't do that, it's obviously something that's punishable by law under the Marriage Act. But generally, providing that the people have got that certificate for marriage, the civil requirements will have been met, and the marriage can actually go ahead. But within canon law, that's the law within the church. And again, I'm not sure what happens within the Anglican tradition and other Christian traditions, but certainly oops, just go back a bit. Certainly within the context of the church, we have a chancery office which deals with all of the legislation that goes with that. And as I intimated earlier on, if one of the people is a non-baptized person, for example, special permissions have to be gone through. It doesn't mean that the marriage can't take place. Of course, it can and often does, and most times does. But it also checks to make sure that no other valid marriages exist. because obviously, you know, somebody can't be married twice, either under the law of the land or the law of the church. So we have to make sure that somebody is either single, or that if there is another marriage, that it has been dealt with in the appropriate way. If it hasn't, then the marriage can't go ahead. But that period can take, you know, to actually get that paperwork done can take anywhere from 6 weeks to 6 months. And generally speaking, we always say that people should approach the church at least 6 months before to make sure that that's concluded. The other thing is that if an interesting fact that came back from our Chancellor, that as far as the church is concerned, that all marriages are presumed to be legitimate unless they can be proved otherwise, because and they have to be dealt with appropriately. So, relationships in marriage. It was a few years ago now, but I'm just trying to think. Pope John Paul II, the Pope before Pope Francis, produced a series of documents that became to be known as the Theology of the Body, and that dealt with, you know, the real sometimes difficult subject about relationships and sexuality within the context of marriage. And man is a relational being, and we are created male and female by God in his image. A man fulfills his vocation as man only by giving himself in love. And self-gift is the answer to the fundamental question of who am I? In the context of marriage, the man and the woman fulfill their vocation insofar as they accept each other as a gift and make themselves a gift to each other. This gift involves the whole of the person: intellectual, emotional, spiritual, and physical. Man also is a sexual being. Sexuality differentiates us. It forms our identity and is the key component of our relationships. In the beginning, Adam first acknowledged himself as man only after he had identified an other, the woman Eve. Flesh of my flesh and bone of my bones. His response was to leave father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they became one flesh, and from Genesis. This union of mind, heart and soul, integrated within and inseparable from the human body, is the purpose and goal of Christian marriage. Christ is the model par excellence of the marital union. He came down from heaven and was joined to his bride, taking the body of his own. He gave himself whole and entire in the body on the cross, and this act consummated the perfect act of love, so that he came to share in our human life. We might share in his divine life, the union of the Blessed Trinity. The cross is thus the standard by which couples entering into a Catholic marriage are to be instructed, by which they seek to love their spouse. In the preparation of couples for marriage, it is vital to explore how they relate to each other as male and female. Doubtless they already do, but enlightening and purifying their way of relating to each other in the light of sacred scripture and the church's teaching shall be the task of a marriage preparation course. And it's a fact that I would say most couples, in fact the vast majority, 99% maybe, undertake a form of a marriage preparation course, which takes the form of a single day plus interactive course, which covers the whole issue of marriage, you know, right from what we're talking about now, relationships, through to, you know, finances. It's quite a packed day, but it's a requirement, certainly in our diocese, that people undergo a course such as this before they actually enter, you know, think about entering into the marriage. And it's, you know, when people start to realise the commitment that is required in actually making a marriage work, and I refer back to my very first slide, you know, there have been occasions, thankfully not too many, where a couple have said, well, hang on a minute, I don't think we're ready for this, we'd better think about that. And in some ways, that's a better way to approach marriage than it is to sort of just jump into it and then, as I said earlier on, you know, 5 or 6 years down the line, decide, oh no, that was a big mistake, we're going to divorce. So the whole idea is to prepare for lasting marriages. Their mutual submission to one another must be the key by which the wife understands her submission to her husband. Christ's own submission in laying down his life for his bride must be the model for the husband as head of the wife. Explained properly, the couple should understand that they are a partnership of equals, but that their differentiation as male and female, the level of sexuality, means that they love one another in a way that is proper to them. It is therefore within the context of mutual submission that we explore the differences between men and women and draw out their complementarity. At that point, I think I'm 7:58, Oren, is that about right?
Yeah, Phil, it's a minute to 8 now, so if you want...
Yeah, okay. If we can just pause for the next 3 or 4 minutes, and for those that want to leave, to show their appreciation for the NHS and frontline onto that. And if you just remind me, we were talking about this, I'll call it a lesson from Pope John Paul II. It was called The Theology of the Body, which actually, as I say, really delves into the whole subject from a spiritual perspective. But it talks about the mutual submission to one another. And it must be the key by which the wife understands a husband, and the husband, again, understands the wife. And about the fact and their differentiation as male and female, their level of sexuality means that they love one another in a way that is proper to them. It's therefore in this context that we explore the differences between men and women and draw out their complementarity, as well as highlighting the difficulties and misunderstandings that result as we struggle with our own sinfulness. We discuss the qualities and virtues that the husband and wife must both possess: charity, joy, peacefulness, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, among others, for their marriage to be fruitful. We will highlight also the tendencies and struggles which commonly manifest themselves in relationships. Nothing, as with the virtues, how these vary according to the particular strengths and weaknesses of a man or a woman. And finally, having looked together and taken the objective view of the Christian understanding of what it is to be male or female, we can frame these understandings with a particular context of the individual men and women that are receiving this instruction. And bearing in mind that while we may be able to identify many common areas, the task of mutual submission always takes place in a particular relationship between unique individuals. And as may be ascertained from what we've already said, the writings of Pope John Paul II, particularly Love and Responsibility and Theology of the Body, in the area of marriage and family, will be normative texts from which and through which they will draw out their understanding of the ideal of the relationship of a man and a woman in marriage. Hence, a familiarity with these words, as far as we're concerned, is really important. Just take a few moments on fertility, and it's I think it's well known and well documented, the Catholic view on natural fertility, and also the openness to fertility within a marriage. And certainly within that context, and I'm no expert in this area, but there are certain doctors that are now looking at the way that Catholic teaching has begun to influence the understanding of human fertility, and how this has sort of gone away from the idea that children should be received as a gift rather than as a nuisance or something that stops a career or something like that. And again, I know it's an incredibly emotive subject, but the interesting thing is, from an ecological perspective, I know that there have been some studies about the levels of, for example, the female hormone estrogen that's being released into the ecosystems and is beginning to change things that are happening within nature. So, again, it's just another aspect that is sort of beginning to sort of tilt the balance towards perhaps moving away from using certain chemicals to adjust fertility, and actually begin to understand what happens within the human body. And again, there are many non-Catholics who are beginning to sort of understand and practice this. So it's an area that is not particular to Catholicism, but an area that obviously people often think about. In fact, they you know, very often we used to sort of say, if you asked, you know, somebody who wasn't or didn't know about the Catholic faith, to say, you know, name two things about it, said, oh, you go to confession to confess all your sins, and you don't use contraception, and that was the only two things that they knew about it. So anyway, we digress slightly. Living a Catholic marriage, and again I reflect back to that very first slide, and you know, the wedding being the event and the marriage being the achievement, but the family finds in the plan of God, the Creator and Redeemer, not only its identity, what it is, but also its mission and what it can and what it should do. The role that God calls the family to perform in history derives from what the family is. Its role represents the dynamic and existential development of what it is. Each family finds within itself a summons that cannot be ignored, and that specifies both its dignity and its responsibility. Family, become what you are. Forming a community of persons, lifelong loving service, participating in the development of society, and sharing the life and mission of the Church. Husband and wife witness to the indissoluble, mutual and exclusive nature of marriage. They are open to the gift of children. They care for and love their children. Those who are sick, the older members of the family, they give mutual service every day. They share their goods, joys and sorrows. Father and mother teach their children by word and example the benefits of living moral lives based on prayer, fasting and almsgiving, on welcoming the word of the Lord in Scripture, and on faithful and regular reception of the sacraments, and with and through the children to the Church and to the world. Parents not only communicate the gospel to their children, but from their children they themselves receive the same gospel as lived by them. They will seek the best education for their children, being prepared to make great sacrifices for the good of their offspring. They teach their children to pray. For example, it's a great tradition that families will pray the Rosary and other popular prayers and devotions. They introduce their children to the prayer in the Church, both in the sense of preparing for it and extending it into personal, family and social life. They participate in the celebration of the Eucharist, especially on Sundays and on feast days, and in other sacraments. They take responsibility for helping to prepare their children to receive the sacraments of initiation. The Catholic family will celebrate the times and feasts of the liturgical year at home, for example, Advent and Lent, as well as Christmas and Easter. But yesterday was another feast, a big feast within the Catholic Church and in many of the Eastern Christian traditions as well, the Feast of the Epiphany. The Catholic family is open to other families and to society. It respects and fosters personal dignity in each and every one as the only basis for value. Families, both singly and in association, devote themselves to social service activities, and especially as the children grow up, involve all their members as much as possible. There will be times in marriages when a couple will face a number of challenges. And the challenges come around for a variety of reasons. Worries about health, money, work, birth of a child, family relationship issues which are impacting on the couple. Commitment and communication are vital within the marriage and essential to work through the challenges which will inevitably ensue. It's important also to recognise that the way spouses will approach any particular issue is often conditioned by their own family experience. This is often referred to as family of origin. Family of origin refers to the family that the couple grew up in and includes siblings and parents. It can include a grandparent or other relative or step-parents and step-siblings that were part of an individual's childhood. The members of our family of origin and our relationships with them and the family as a whole profoundly influence who we become. Family of origin is the place We learn to be who we are, for better or for worse. We can be considered in this respect to be the sum of our experiences, so it's important to recognise that issues which may be insignificant to one may hold great importance to the other. We also recognise that when a couple get married, the two families are also joined, and this in time can place strains on the relationship. Significant family occasions are examples of this, and where to spend, for example, the first Christmas can provide a catalyst for one of those challenging moments to manifest themselves. Whatever the issue it remains important that the couple understand that there are a range of approaches which can be adopted to maintain communication and reach mutual understanding. Just a couple of points just on relationships and on communications and what we say about possible conflicts, and then I'd like to sort of pause and open for questions. When couples come together, they bring their own needs, assumptions, fears, talents, and expectations. In the initial stages of a relationship, couples will explore a lot about each other and establish their roles within the relationship, hopefully moving towards a stable and committed relationship where both people feel secure and loved. In a relationship, there are times when a small issue or difference is experienced by only one in the relationship, and the challenge comes about when the couples try to deal with these. When these issues are dealt with in an environment of love and support, the relationship can stabilise and be strengthened by the discussion. Sometimes a much larger or significant issue will be experienced and the couple may feel unable to cope. On these occasions, the couples may need to seek outside help through counselling, for example, to resolve their issues and get back to a stronger relationship. And it must be recognised that seeking help from outside shows a positive attitude to resolving an issue and is not a sign of failure. If the couple continue to ignore any issues, then the relationship is likely to suffer in the long term. And remember that that's what we're aiming to do. We're aiming to build lasting, long-lasting relationships. Communications, just a quick word on that. As already been mentioned, good communications are vital and that the married relationship develops and flourishes. Communications between the couple are both spoken and unspoken. Sometimes when a problem manifests itself, even in the most communicative couple, it is difficult to know where to start. The fear, for example, of being ignored, causing more offence, being laughed at or not even being taken seriously can hamper communications to a point when talk is probably the wisest thing a couple can do. However, we do recognise that if one or other of the couple are angry, then it's probably best to allow a period to cool off. I'm going to pause there, but just to say that one of the things that I did do, and I offer it, there was a psychologist, Gary Chapman, who talked about, on that subject of communications, talked about the love languages and referred to, you might wish to just look him up. His name's Gary Chapman, and the love languages that he described are time, words, actions, gift, and touch. And they're the three ways, or the 5 ways, if you like, that we tend to communicate with each other, and with particular reference within a marriage. But again, that's a little bit of something that if you want a little bit of further reading or a bit of further discussion, then perhaps we can work our way through that on another time. But anyway, I've hit you with an awful lot of stuff at the moment, so hopefully there are a few questions. If not, we've got early finish.
Yeah, there are a few questions here,
Yep.
and if anyone wants to ask afterwards, then obviously.
Okay.
Mute.
Okay, I'll do my best, Dora. I'll do my best.
So the first one is from Melvin and Maggie, and they're asking, does the priest sometimes say people are not yet ready for a wedding?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. What we're finding in our church particularly, we haven't actually come across that, but there are times where one of the duties of the priest, and within, I mentioned canon law earlier on, it's a requirement that the priest meets on 3 separate occasions with the couple. Why it's the number 3 came in, I'm not absolutely sure, but that was what the law, the canon law, actually specified. And very often, part of the job of the priest is to make sure that the couple understand fully what they're entering into. So there may be an opportunity, and it's not unheard of, where not necessarily the priest will say that they're not ready, but the couple themselves will actually, the priest will obviously, help them to come to that decision and say, look, perhaps we need to think about this a little bit more, when they realise what the commitment of marriage really is. Okay, hopefully that's answered that one. Is that okay?
Yeah, I think Melvin and Maggie, if you have any follow-up, then you can either unmute yourself or ask you. So Catherine wanted to mention that although most of the underlying principles are consistent, Catholic marriage does not fully align with other Christian traditions. And for example, she gave the Anglican tradition where there are fewer requirements in terms of who can be married in a church.
Mm-hmm.
Also that the marriage preparation course is encouraged, but is not mandatory.
Yeah, that's it. And again, some of these things will be specific to a specific, particular bishop or diocese, who will really, if you like, set the tone within that. But certainly the requirement for marriage preparation, sometimes it's in the form of a course. And I'll give you an example. In England and Wales, because England and Wales are joined together underneath one bishop's conference, the requirement is that people would, in normal circumstances, have a one-day course with an organisation called Marriage Care. And they're an organisation that are well experienced in both preparing couples for marriage and also helping couples through difficult times in marriage. A similar diocese in one of the African countries, for example, will require 14 weeks preparation for marriage. And again, that's then the requirement. So they do vary because, Catholic means universal, and the universal church across the world, it does vary slightly, but there is a requirement nonetheless to have at least 3 meetings with the priest in terms of preparation. And within the context of those meetings, the couple will begin to, will understand what is expected of them within a marriage from the church and spiritual perspectives, but also what the commitment that they need to bring with each other to that marriage. Okay, is that okay, Oren?
Thanks. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I'm not sure who answered the question actually.
Catherine was asking.
Kathleen, right? Okay, is that okay, Kathleen? If you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, I think it was more about just trying to emphasise that the Catholic Church doesn't represent the whole Christian Church.
Absolutely.
And just that there are differences. So I think whereas this tonight is titled Christian marriage, it's been a bit more Catholic marriage.
Yeah, I did actually, in my introduction, I did say that, I'm speaking from a Catholic perspective. So, I take the point, and yes, very much so. There are, there really are a number of things that very closely align, but there will be some certain differences, and perhaps, I've just tried to highlight some of those differences as well.
Okay.
But thank you very much for that.
Thanks. A question from Badru. It is assumed that couples getting married have not been in a relationship before marriage or are not in any other relationship, but this is sometimes not the case. So are there any recommendations made for the wedding couples to have a sexual health check before the matrimonial declaration to prevent onward transmission of sex infections or conditions that are genetically transmitted?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. And to my knowledge, there is no formal requirement for people to have a health check. However, one of the issues that comes up time and time again, and I think we realise that we're living in very different times to say even sort of 60 or 70 years ago, in terms of Catholic tradition or even Christian tradition, where people would not even, you know, be in the same house together before the marriage. You know, nonetheless, you know, have, you know, multiple partners before a marriage. So, you know, we recognise that, and certainly in terms of, you know, there may be some conversations that people need to be very clear in and truthful in, certainly to their partners, in terms of you know, what their life has been before, and that's part of it. I mean, part of the you know, that mutual gift that I spoke about earlier on is that, you know, the person needs to understand that they're, you know, that they're giving their whole self as a gift to that person mutually, and the other person gives to them. You can't give half of yourself, and by giving half yourself, you can't sort of hold back on some information that might be relevant. But it's not a direct requirement, but it would be something that I think that the couple may need to be, depending on the individual circumstances, may need to be helped through to understand that. The only thing that does come in is, there's certainly in terms of genetics, is that although there's, I think, a legal, and again, correct me, please somebody correct me if I'm wrong on this, I think legally people can marry, for example, their first cousins. It's certainly not something that is that would be either encouraged or you know, sort of something that would be, you know, generally supported. And I think I'm right in saying that. But I know that within some traditions, that's, you know, that's something that has been an issue, which of course brings within it some difficulties, possibly with children in future times. But no, direct answer to the question, there's no requirement for a health check or genetic check or whatever, but it's an area that I'm sure, if necessary, would need to be discussed.
Thanks. Larry is asking what is involved in ending a marriage, and
in annulling a marriage, is that
ending? Yeah.
In annulling a marriage. Yeah. Now there's an interest. That's an interesting thing. We have. I did mention our chancery, and that's one of the functions of the chancery, to actually look. And now again, it becomes extremely legal, and the people that are involved in that whole process are, you know, are trained canon lawyers in much the same way as you'd get a lawyer in a you know, in a civil court. They're trained in exactly the same way in the law, and I wouldn't tread in that area about the whole range of different things. But all I do know is, and I did sort of intimate that right at the beginning, there are times when a marriage has to be either annulled or dissolved. I'm not too sure of exactly what the correct term is, but and that would have to be dealt with by the chancery, and that is a long process, and it involves the interviewing the couple, it involves interviewing other people, and what it would actually hinge on is the validity of that marriage at the beginning, as far as I understand. For example, if one of the partners wasn't completely truthful when they entered into that marriage, then that can also throw some doubt, some concern in terms of the validity of the marriage. Do you see what I mean? But again, this is an extremely complex and difficult area of canon law. So that's my sort of very lay understanding of it. But there is a process, and people can go through that process, and you know, sometimes the request is upheld and sometimes it's not. It's a bit like you know, when people go to an appeal court or something, you know, sometimes the appeal is upheld and sometimes it's not. But it is it's quite a long, drawn out process. May take, depending on the number of people that have to be interviewed, may take, you know, 12 months, might even take a couple of years. But it can be done. And it's not what some people call it. They call it, oh, it's the Catholic divorce. It's not that. It's about looking at the validity of the marriage, as far as I understand. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I'm not sure who answered the question.
Thanks. Yeah, it was Larry.
Larry. Oh, sorry, Larry. So thank you, Larry. Hopefully that answers the question.
I actually feel it's an interesting point, because if it's annulment, that's saying there was never a marriage in the first place.
That's
When
right. Yeah.
it is a marriage, and the parties say it has to come to an end.
Yeah, that there is a great difference, and that's the point that I was trying to make. And again, I'd have to really sort of refer back. I mean, I did cover this as part of the work, but it was an area that, because I'm not a lawyer, an area that I didn't delve greatly in, other than it was as if the marriage hadn't existed. Now that throws into some sort of confusion. Well, what happens if there's children there? Well, of course, those children are still the children of that couple, irrespective. But we're only talking about the specific sacrament of the marriage actually taking place. Because obviously the divorce, if a couple actually divorce civilly, then they're divorced as far as that's concerned. But the dealing with the marriage, and each marriage is different, and each marriage has to be dealt with differently, but that could be the end result. The marriage itself could be annulled. Okay, thank you, Larry. Thank you for that.
Thanks. And Miti, I don't know if it answers your question as well, but Miti was asking how divorced people now viewed in Catholicism, as in Catholic divorced people.
I mean, I could just add on to that. You know, the marriage is, and I use the word indissoluble, the indissolubility of the marriage. And as far as a divorce, if a couple get divorced civilly, you know, they will still be married within the eyes of the church, unless that marriage is dealt with in a particular way.
Thanks. Pratibha is asking, I'd like to attend the marriage preparation day to find out more about it. How could I do this?
Well, the interesting thing is I asked exactly the same question, and I had to go with my wife because they do. There is a cost involved in it, because they, you know, obviously people are, have to prepare materials and everything else. But that's an interesting thing. And what I'll do is, obviously, it'll have to be when COVID is all over, because we can't do anything at the moment. And again, I'm not sure. We've had in our church no marriages this year. My wife, who happens to be an authorised person, has been the authorised person at, I think, 2 marriages this year in another church. So there are very, very few. So I don't think they're running any courses at the moment. But I will make a note to actually ask the question and see whether somebody could attend one of these things. The only thing that I'd say is that they do focus very much on the relationship of the couple, and they do, you know, take couples from exactly where they are at that particular time. There's no presumption, no judgment or whatever. That it's about trying to build their relationship. And again, you know, there's so many of the principles that would apply to, to any faith tradition, I'm sure. But I'll make some inquiries. So thank you for that.
Thanks. We have another question from Larry. In your opinion, to what degree does the reality of the lives of people who consider themselves Catholics reflect the viewpoints that you spoke about this evening?
Is that with particular reference to fertility and contraception? Is that what you're referring to?
No, Phil, it's more in general terms.
Oh, more in general terms. Well, I think, you know, generally the sad thing about it is that very often people will ask for a church marriage, but, you know, they may not be regular attenders at church. They may not be. However, you know, we don't judge when somebody comes and they says they want, you know, the blessing of God on their marriage, and they want it within the context of the Catholic Church. Sorry, I've just disappeared again. They want it within the context of the church. Then it would be very difficult to say to that couple, well, we're not going to marry you. But in terms of it, I mean, we've seen. And again, this predates COVID a little bit. As I say, I did make a very slight reference to it. You know, one of the big concerns that we've got within society is that society tends to be moving to much more a secular society, and the marriage is seen sometimes in some people's eyes as just a celebration, literally the icing on the cake. So what we do try to do is to encourage those, because obviously children are going to come along, and parents are the primary educators of their children. So we would hope that by going through a preparation, by understanding what it's like to live within the context of a Christian marriage, to talk about the things, all the things that we've spoken about this evening, that they would actually begin then to reflect within their lives, their Catholicity. I can remember back going to, I gave a talk in Philadelphia at the World Meeting of Families some years ago. And what that spoke about was the traditions that we all, that we share within a Catholic home. I mean, one of the questions was, if I was to walk into a Jewish home, for example, I'm pretty sure I'd be in no doubt I was in a Jewish home. I would see signs, symbols. The first thing, and on the doorpost, the mezuzah. Is that right? Is that right? I'd see a mezuzah first of all before I even went in there. There would be. I may see, if I went there, at a particular time, then I would see the candles being lit. I would see things happening that would be an outward sign of that faith and the traditions that carry on within. Certainly within Catholic tradition and sometimes within the wider Christian traditions as well. Some of those things we've lost. The opportunity to say grace before meal, to give thanks for what we're about to receive. It's something that's sort of drifted away. Those sorts of things. We used to have by the front door in I would say almost every. Certainly every Catholic home and in many other Christian homes, a small water font to bless yourself when you went in and out of the church, as a reminder of our baptism. Those sorts of things, they've drifted away. So sadly, in answer to your question, very long answer, I'm afraid, but sadly, it's working some of the time, but it's not working all of the time. But what we're hoping to do is to gradually and that was my job when I was working for the diocese, was to actually, try and get people to really live their faith rather than, become a Catholic for an hour on a Sunday. That was the, putting it bluntly, that was what we're trying to do. Because, I would say to be a person of faith, you have to be a person of faith within your life. I know my Muslim neighbours. I see them going out 5 times a day to pray. I see that. That's their outward sign. I see the clothes that they wear, that they do. Don't necessarily see that with others, other than you might see a queue of cars outside a church on a Sunday. So, but then that's the challenge that I think as people of faith that we all have. I mean, one of the things that we often say is that we show by example. You can't tell somebody, you show by your example. And if you're a good person and a good person of faith, then people will say, well, hang on a minute, there's something there that we perhaps need to be part of. Okay, thank you, Larry. Is that okay?
Thanks, Phil.
Yeah.
And Shirley was asking something that touches a bit of what you were just talking about. She's saying, I find that the Catholic Church does not teach enough of the Christian principles. Listening to the teachings of John Paul II in Eternal World Television Network, I realize why so many people leave the church and do not take marriage as serious as people attend the Catholic service. But many do not leave the faith. I think it's time to really teach the congregation. Yeah,
it is, and that's what we aim to do. But as I say, this is it's a bit of a mountain to climb. I mean, for a start, you have to sometimes be where people are. You can't, just expect them to come. Although I think it was, it was Pope Francis that said, in order to attract people, you need to be attractive. And that's, that's one of the issues, one of the challenges. Now, that doesn't mean we throw all our traditions away. That doesn't mean that we suddenly change and do a song and a dance in the middle of a mass or something just because it's attractive. I don't mean that, but what I do mean is that we have to be able to communicate with people in a way that they can understand. In practice, I found that most people's, and I'll say religious education, the learning about their faith, the understanding of their faith, ended when they left school. To actually go to mass, and this applies to to many other Christian traditions as well. To go to a service, to listen to the gospel, to listen to an Old Testament, to listen to the Psalm readings, maybe have a homily, maybe have a talk, that won't necessarily fulfill them. And I'll give you just a little example of a real event that happened to a priest friend of mine, not that far from here. And he had a visitor from Africa who came in, and the mass was there. It was the same mass that you would hear, albeit in different languages all over the world. He gave his homily, 8 minutes or so, as I was discussing with Larry earlier on. And as he went out, I mean, it's always, the custom for the priest to sort of say goodbye, thank you, and people saying, thank you, Father, thank you for your homily, thanks for coming. This guy just came up to him and he just looked him in the eye and he said, is that it? Is that all I get? He was used to walking, 2 or 3 hours to get to church. It would be all day. The homily would go on for probably, I don't mean go on in the sense that it was boring or whatever, would captivate people for 2 hours or more. And then, he'd have a meal, he'd share with all his friends, he'd meet up with his friends that he hadn't seen all week, and then he'd do the 2 or 3 hours walk back home again. So to sort of walk in there, a very short thing. Now, that's not a criticism of the priest, because that's the sort of the habit that we've got used to. But in terms of understanding faith, there is a lot more we can do. Once this COVID thing is all over, I mean, certainly we usually run, there are 2 significant times within the Christian calendar, and you'll be familiar with them. Christmas is one of them, but the biggest feast that we celebrate is Easter, and that's preceded by a period of preparation, 40 days, I think it's 47 days, sorry, of preparation we call Lent. And now within that whole process, what we've tried to do is to run individual little courses, focusing on one particular aspect. It may be the lives of some holy people. It may be, understanding the sacraments a little bit deeper. But the whole idea is to try and, really encourage people to really look into what their faith is all about, not just follow it on that's what we did last week, so we'll do it again this week basis. Really try and understand it, and that's a huge challenge, and that I think is a challenge that lots of Christian traditions can face. Thank you. I might have gone off track a little bit there, but I'm not sure.
That was your question. Mitty was asking, is there such a thing as gay marriage in the Catholic Church?
No, I mean, the thing is, I've got no experience of that, so I can't answer about it. It's interesting that I work with a charity called Explore, which again, when COVID is over, we go into schools and actually talk to sort of, 15, 16, 17, 18-year-olds about the real aspect of marriage and speak from a couple's perspective. And they're able to ask any questions, and very often that's one of the questions that we get asked. What about gay marriage? Well, I've got, myself and my wife, we're not in a gay marriage. My understanding is that marriage is between a man and a woman, but I know that the law, and I'm, I understand enough about the law of the land to say that, that's been given that opportunity. I think the thinking within the Catholic Church, I think, is beginning to change, and I think I can't remember exactly, but I know Pope Francis made some comments about particularly about gay relationships just before Christmas. And again, I'd have to look it up, but I know that, and they weren't negative comments, but at the same time, the understanding within the Catholic Church and certainly in a lot of other Christian traditions as well, I can't speak for all of them, is that the marriage is between a man and a woman, and that's it. So it doesn't actually exist within a Catholic context, no.
Thanks. Bunny is asking, what is the status of children after an annulment?
Well, they're still the children of that couple. They're not illegitimate or anything like that. They're still very much the children of that couple. And again, the annulment, I think, and again, I do stress that I'm not a lawyer. I don't really understand the intricacies of this, but what I do know is those children are no different. They still have the mum and the dad, and the fact that their marriage was dealt with, you know, in a technical way and is effectively annulled, because generally that's about that person wishing to be remarried. Then, you know, they know that they've got a biological father, and then they end up with a stepfather. And we see time and time again what people begin to refer to as blended families, and that happens. And we understand families come in all shapes and sizes. I think the important thing is that the children, you know, are loved and cared for and nurtured in all the ways that we've spoken about earlier on.
Thanks. Pauline is asking, are divorcees permitted to take communion?
No, that's an interesting thing. And again, I think Pope Francis got caught on a plane, didn't he? This was about 3 or 4 years ago. And that is something. Permitted is an interesting word, because one of the things that God gave us is free will. But he also gave us a conscience. And, you know, we understand that, you know, that people have to have their conscience formed. They can't just sort of say, oh, well, that's what I think I do. You know, they have to understand the reasoning why they do it. But I think one of the things that Pope Francis said was that, and again, I apologise if I misquote him, but he said something along the lines that he wanted to see Holy Communion, which is you know, for Catholics and again many other Christian traditions, is receiving Christ. You know, it's that communion, that union with Christ. So it's an incredibly important sacrament in terms of the church. But what he said was that he wanted to see it as a sacrament for the sick, in terms of people that needed healing. And there's a tremendous amount of healing that is required in terms of somebody that is divorced and in many other circumstances, rather than a reward for the good. So, you know, again, I can't see sudden changes, because the Catholic Church moves extremely slowly in many respects, for good reasons. But people have to make their conscience guide them. Have to let their conscience guide them, as they do in all sorts of things. The one thing I know, and I'm also, part of the things that I do is a minister of communion, which means that I give communion to people within the context of a service, but also take it into places, again, once the COVID thing is finished, into hospitals and into their homes if they need it. You know, I can never refuse to give somebody communion. That's up to their conscience and up to their free will to know about it. All I know is that is, you know, that we believe that they're receiving Christ wholly, and you know, that to me is probably, they call it the source and summit. Communion is the source and summit. So it's the most important thing that they could receive. So it's a very difficult issue, but I'm pretty sure that however long it takes, that people will be. Sorry, I've gone off again. People will certainly be thinking very differently about that at some time in the future, maybe.
It's just that I know a lady who was a divorcee, and it broke her heart that she couldn't have him.
Which is what I refer back to, where, you know, I think, and as I say, it is for a Catholic person to be told you cannot receive. Now, you know, one of the things is that we do say that, you know, you must be in what we refer to as a state of grace. In other words, that you have no overburdening, you know, you don't sort of walk out, murder somebody, then walk in and have communion. You know, can you imagine the difficulty that would be? You know, you're an unrepentant person. You don't, you know, you don't really believe what you're doing, but you just think you're going to do it just for the sake of it. You know, and that's not a good situation. But to be in that situation is a really, really difficult situation, and I think that's why Pope Francis, you know, began to see Holy Communion as a sacrament for the sick, not just a reward for the good. Okay, thank you.
In the chat, there are no further questions. I don't know if anyone has anything else that they would like to ask and unmute themselves. And no.
No.
Thank you, Phil. I think it was very interesting, and looking at the feedback in the chat, I think a lot share the same feeling. So thank you very much, and appreciate it.
Phil, can I thank you on behalf of everybody for a really fascinating, interested and detailed talk. And I almost forgot, although I think most of you are ahead of me, we'd be really interested to know what you think of this first session of this series. So perhaps you would kindly, in the time we have left, let us know what you think either by chat or an email to Redbridge Faith Forum, or to me, or to Oren, or a phone call. But I'm sure it's all going to be absolutely wonderful. And that's Phil, that was a wonderful way to start. And I'm delighted that we had 36 devices, which looking at faces tells me we had about 40 people. And that was a really wonderful way to kick off.
Yeah.
Thank you ever so much, Phil.
Thank you, Tony. Tony, we're looking forward, and I'm even looking forward even more to the next talk. But do we know, Oren, who is the next talk?
Well, next Thursday, if I may jump in, we will welcome Pratibha and Vinaya, who will be speaking with us about the Hindu understanding of marriage. Same time, same place. So
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for your attention.
Until then, as we say in modern Hebrew, lehitraot, until we see you then. Keep well, everybody. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Everyone for joining.
Thanks a lot, Phil.
Thanks.
Thank you, Phil. That was wonderful.
Well done, Phil.
Thank you. Thanks, Sarah.